We are back with the Hubscale podcast, where we dive into the minds of security leaders all around the world. This week we have Dorin Baniel, head of EMEA at NightDragon. We've got some super exciting topics to dive in today, and Dorin, it is great to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited.
No problem.
Great to be here.
No problem at all. So I'd love to, for anybody who's listening, it'd be great to give a quick introduction to yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So Dorin, I live in Israel, originally from the US. So I spent 18 years or so in the US, and then moved back here about 8 years ago. I have, experience in different companies, whether it's tech like Microsoft, whether it's startups like Conversant, which was acquired for over $2 billion and founded by serial entrepreneur Yair Goldfinger, to venture capital. So right now I'm the principal and head of EMEA at NightDragon. I'm in charge of, finding the best companies for us from this region to invest in. And prior to that, I was at Glilot Capital. Glilot is an early stage Israeli VC. I was there for 5 years, starting from 2018 and up until early this year. During my time there, I was the VP of Value Creation, and so I was responsible for the success of all of the different portfolio companies. And, as seed stage investors, we would invest in companies that just had, a very strong team and a deck. And so working with these founders from day one to build out the strategy, to build out the execution, and, look at Hermetic, for example, which was acquired. The acquisition was announced last week. So, for example, with them, I was working hand in hand with Shai and Arik from ideation stage. So in order to really support all of these companies from scratch and be very hands-on, I built and we managed the advisory board council for Glilot. It was over 120 different C-levels. At one point, or for a couple of the years, I managed the marketing department. So all the PR, the website that you see, different events, annual LP events and stuff like that. Worked on also some fundraising for 2 of the funds. So it was a lot of hands-on work with founders, growing companies. I've worked on something like 20 different active companies. Half of them were acquired. For example, Cider, which was acquired by Palo Alto Networks after about 1.5 years, which was a crazy ride. But also companies like Hermetic, Insights, Polar, which was acquired recently as well. So that's a bit about me. I've always been really interested in 3 main aspects, and I think venture capital really encompasses those 3. One is people. So, I have a degree in psychology, and the second is technology. So part of my degree and everything that I've done in my career has been all around technology. And the third is business. So how do you create something that has a viable need in the market? And, why do some companies succeed and others not? And I think venture capital is really, the definition of those 3 areas and what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack there, especially the 3 main points. I want to dive into that maybe soon, and the value creation side, because it's super interesting. But kind of before we go into that, Dorin, tell me more about NightDragon. Obviously, Dave DeWalt, big name in the security industry, but I'd love to know more about the business itself.
Yeah. So NightDragon is a VC. We're an investment and advisory firm. We're focused on late stage, growth stage companies and what we call the CSSP market. So C for cybersecurity, S for safety, the second S for national and physical security, and the fourth, the P for privacy. So yes, Dave is a CEO. He's a serial CEO, one of the most successful and well-respected security executives out there, formerly the CEO of Documentum, which was sold to Dell EMC for $2 billion, and CEO of McAfee, which was acquired by Intel for $8 billion, CEO of FireEye, chairman of Mandiant, which was acquired recently by Google for over $5 billion. So, he's got a lot of leadership experience. He's on the board and an investor in some of the leading and most innovative companies like Clarity, which is a portfolio company. Delta Airlines, 5 9, Scout. On top of that, he also works very closely, you know, with various governments. So he was appointed by President Obama to the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Council. That's a mouthful, but he's worked very closely with the presidential administration for years, you know, starting with Obama, now Biden. He's part of CISA and more. So alongside Dave, though, I do want to continue and mention that Ken, who is the co-founder of NightDragon, Ken Gonzalez, and alongside him, we have Morgan, who's the third managing director. They both have this vast experience in corp dev. So together, you know, they've bought over, I think, like 65 different companies throughout their careers, and a lot of them in the cybersecurity space. And alongside them, the fourth partner is Amy. Amy is a partner of value creation, and I'll talk more about value creation per your question. And she has tons of different experience in partnerships and alliances from different corporates like McAfee and others. So the four of them together, you know, come with tons of different operating experience, having been the CEO or having been the buyers of companies, the growers of companies. And with that, really, like, our investment philosophy is to take this operating risk rather than tech risk. And when I say operating risk, I mean execution risk, right? So that's why we invest later on, and really invest in companies that can leverage this know-how and the network and other things like that to grow their companies from that 20 million in ARR to 100 million and IPO eventually. So we're very hands-on, and we like to kind of provide this strategic operating platform to all of our companies.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm excited to kind of dive into NightDragon and NightScale later on down into the podcast as well. But value creation, we've mentioned that quite a lot recently, or already at the start of the podcast. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And what does value creation actually mean?
Okay, so I think, you know, back in Glilot, I think we were the first, or one of the first, to establish value creation. I think a lot of different VCs throughout the last few years have created this kind of department. Different VCs look at it differently. I think the way it should be looked at is a very data-driven, hands-on approach to grow your portfolio. Because at the end of the day, LPs, you know, the investors of the VC, they want to see returns and they want to lower their risk. So what better way to lower your risk as a venture capitalist than to have a full department that's solely dedicated to making sure that the investment decisions you make will be successful in the end, and therefore be able to return these, you know, be able to provide significant returns back to the LPs. So at Glilot, we had various value creation pillars that we built. It was all based on, you know, how do we get these early stage companies to product market fit in the fastest and most scalable way. Had a lot of different, you know, strategy discussions, discussions with different potential buyers. So if it's a cybersecurity company, you know, look at Hermetic, for example. I think we had over 100 different CISO discussions that we at Glilot would set up for the company, get this feedback, ask specific questions in order to get the company to product market fit as fast as possible. And beyond that, you know, when the company is now at, like, let's say 2 million in ARR to 5 or something like that, we need to double down on getting more and more customers. Beyond that, you need to hire the right executives to lead the company, whether it's, you know, your first VP sales, your first VP marketing, the partnerships person. And when you get to that higher level in terms of ARR, it's all about partnerships. So when we at NightDragon provide this robust platform called NightScale, it's all about how to get that company and identify the pain points for those later stage companies, which are all around partnerships, because that's the fastest way and the most efficient way for a company of that size to really scale. So I can dive deeper into NightScale now or later, whatever you decide.
Yeah. I mean, since we're on the topic of NightScale, I'd love to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I think it really starts with the people. I think everything starts with people, right? So at NightScale, the most important in my mind pillar that we have is people, aka our network. So on one hand, we have an advisory board of over 75 different C-level executives, most of them from very large scale corporates. I'm talking about Fortune 10, Fortune 50 enterprises. These advisors really help our companies, put them in front of the right people, become customers, and so on. The second pillar of this whole network is partners. And I mentioned it a little bit a few minutes ago. But EMEA has built out this massive partnerships network of over, I think, 120 different value add resellers and distributors. And with a handful of them, we actually have these master level service agreements. So our portfolio companies, it's very difficult for a company to get in front of the partner. And when they do get in front of the partner, it's hard to get the partner to actually push their solution. And so these master level service agreements that we've already put in place, they have preferred terms for the portfolio companies. So they get a good deal and they get to opt in, seamlessly and very, very quickly. So that is a really important pillar of NightScale. And the third is all around the government. So I mentioned, Dave works very closely with the governments around the world. And we also have a head of government, Catherine. We have different government officials that we work closely with. We understand the policies and what the government's trying to, kind of push forward. We also have several venture partners and they each represent different governments and different militaries. Like an example, Nadav Tafril, who is the founder of Team 8, also an Israeli VC, and he is the former commander of 8200. We also have General Mike Rogers, who former head of the US Navy, and General Sir Chris Deverell, who is a former commander of the UK's Joint Forces Command, and Thomas Pompidou as well. So we have a lot of connections in that regard too for any company, and we push our companies to really kind of work with the government as well. Beyond that, it's all about playbooks, right? So how can I grow my company? And I think this one is especially important for, let's say, Israeli founders who have a lot of technology know-how, but sometimes they don't really, there's a lot of cultural gaps, and sometimes it can be difficult to know how to do things in a different geography, right? So how can I open offices all around the world? How do I hire the right people all around the world? How do I build advisory boards that are exactly what I need, and communities to support my company? Really like putting a plan and a playbook in place for each company on how to get them to over 100 million in ARR and beyond. And when I say beyond, it's, to IPO, to a large scale M&A, things like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's super exciting. Talk about the partner side of it a little bit, because I've had lots of people on the podcast, from channel leaders to everything along those lines, right? And breaking into the partner ecosystem, especially as a startup, is so hard. It takes a long time to create the program, and it takes a long time to roll that out and create incentives and things along those lines. So tell me more about that, because that's super interesting.
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing for companies at that stage is really utilizing a partner's network in order to scale and to do it efficiently. So when you're talking about, let's say, the Optives of the world, they have tons and tons and tons of different startups that offer different solutions that want to partner with them. But it's all about creating these like better together strategies and these win-wins. So why should Optiv work with you in order to better serve their customers? How can you create this win-win strategy so that it's actually extremely beneficial for these partners to work with you and they want to push you forward? I've heard a lot of stories about startups that have, formed this partnership, but nothing really comes out of it because the partner, they're not able to get in front of the right people. They're not able to really push their company forward within that partnership relationship. So, what Amy and Dave and the partners at NightDragon have built is something that somewhat of a playbook of step by step and how to do it, and how to do it very fast at the right time too.
Yeah, I like that a lot, especially when, say, for an Israeli vendor moving to the US and then to EMEA and APJ, having
Yeah.
channel partners and that ecosystem is so important, because you can't just go and hire loads of people and think it's gonna think it's gonna work out. So no, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, and you know, it's like when you're talking about what's a successful path to an exit, for example, partners is like the most important thing you can do. You know, if you wanna one day be acquired, so your main focus as a founder should be to form these, you know, strategic biz dev partnerships. And you need to really invest in it for years prior to what you anticipate being that M&A date. So it requires years of planning. And, you know, you might also want to bring on strategic investors into your growth rounds, which is why we, for example, partner with a lot of these folks in terms of investing, because then it's a clear win-win, right? So building that strong, you know, partnerships foundation can be helpful in scaling your business. It can also be helpful in potential M&A one day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's super exciting. And you mentioned there about obviously taking a business to an exit or to IPO, things on those lines. So what do you need to look out for as an entrepreneur, and how do you become successful in an exit?
Yeah. So M&A all about partnerships and strategic partnerships, right? If you want to go public one day, actually, I had a very interesting discussion with Udi Mokadi, who is the chairman of CyberArk, the founder of CyberArk, who obviously he took that company public, and he gave some really interesting advice, and he gave like 3 different pillars, I guess I would say, of this advice. One is, you know, predictability, making sure that you're building a model that shows the company is predictable in KPIs and has a strong track record of meeting those targets and of meeting those expectations. I think the second thing is all about making sure that your company, your value offering, your message that you're giving to investors resonates with them. So this has to do with making sure the leadership meets with different research analysts all along the way to ensure that the research analysts understand your story and understand your business, such that, you know, those connections are really formed earlier on. And the third thing is making sure that, you know, your compliance and auditing capabilities are in place, and that everything is really just good to go. So at the point where you're trying to convince these, you know, the public market of why your company is great, it's all about this predictability, making sure your business is functioning as it should, and making sure that really the audience knows what you're doing and believes in what you're doing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I had a podcast with Guy Renat. He was the co-founder of Demisto.
I love Guy. Yeah.
He's an awesome guy, and he was talking about going through the acquisitions and how different it was the first time to then the second time, and all he learned along the way about kind of creating leverage, always keeping the door open for investments as well. So I think it's amazing. And I guess, but for the entrepreneurs listening, Dorin, so tell me about that early stage, because there's a lot of people who listen to this are kind of in that really early stage in terms of their entrepreneurial journey. So how do you, number one, attract a VC like NightDragon, and what makes it stand out?
That's a great question. Okay, so it kind of ties into also like, what do I look for when I evaluate a company for an investment, right? So the first thing, it's all about the people, right? So who is the team? Are they trustworthy? Are they strong? Are they a stable team? You know, do the founders get along? How's the company culture? Who's on the advisory board of that company? Who's on the investors board of that company? And just making sure that everything there is strong, stable, smooth, and reliable, and with high potential, of course. So that's the first thing I look at. And then the second thing is, what's this company doing? Like, are they solving a real problem? And are they solving a problem in a sector within CSSP that's rapidly growing? You know, is the total addressable market, or the TAM, big enough? And are they going to be able to, you know, IPO one day? Are they what's their plan and what's their desires for that. And then third is, how does the business look? Are there good unit economics, whether it's related to top line growth, ARR growth year over year, gross margin, retention metrics, so on. So those three things are really what I look at when I evaluate a company.
Yeah. So tell me about the cider scenario, because that's an amazing fast exit to obviously Palo Alto Networks for really, really cool. And they play in obviously a really cool space as well. But what was right about them in terms of the business, and how did it happen so fast?
Okay, cider. So first of all, Guy is a former CISO of AppsFlyer. So I think that really gave him an edge, because on one hand, he had already a vast network of CISOs and AKA potential buyers of cider, potential customers. I mean, not buyers of the company, but customers of the company. And he knew what a CISO looks for and how a CISO thinks, because he was one. So I think that gave him an edge immediately. And he wasn't just any CISO, but he was a CISO that was an early adopter. So, originally he was actually on the advisory board of Glilot, and he would be the one doing POCs with different portfolio companies. So I think he had that as a huge advantage from the get-go. Daniel, of course, his co-founder, had a lot of different technology experience and is very, very talented. Was such a great pitcher. Every time we jump on a call with CISO, he just, it was flawless. I remember one of the very first conversations ever where the company had the very first deck. It was completely different colors. It was green and red, and just funny to look back on it. But I was introducing them to the CISO of a company. I won't say which one, but he ended up investing in the company because the call went so well, and that CISO believed in the company so much. He said, if you guys get this right, 95% of security problems will be solved. So immediately I knew they were onto something. I think we worked really, really fast to put them in front of the right people. I wouldn't just connect any CEO to any CISO. It's all about, what does the CISO look for? Is it relevant to them as well, right? Everything has to be win-wins continuously. And they were on to a space, the AppSec, CI/CD security that was fast growing in a time when, during COVID, when the cloud was being rapidly adopted, and it was just very good timing, very good team who were put in front of the right people. And the exit happened prior to the kind of downturn of 2022. And so it was a lot of hard work, but I think also a lot of luck.
Yeah. I think luck has to play into it as well, doesn't it? Because timing for an industry is and especially acquisitions is kind of critical as well. So no, I don't know. Where do you think the market's going in terms of kind of the new technologies you're seeing out there and things on those lines?
Yeah. Okay. So this is interesting. I think, in terms of, let's say, trends or new tech trends and things that are areas that are rapidly growing, I'm personally really interested in CRQ, right? The cyber risk quantification space, because there's been a massive shift for CISOs in the last year, 2 years, to really become more of a board level role, or to report to the board level and to present to the board level continuously. So enabling the CISO to take security risk and translate it into business risk, or to be able to quantify, a potential attack route and quantify this into ransomware risk or ransomware dollars at risk is really interesting. And there's a couple of very good companies. We actually are looking in this space, and let's say third-party risk is also booming, cyber insurance, cyber for SMBs. These are all different trends that we're seeing. Of course, cyber for AI, can't ignore that, and more. But, the investment landscape has gone through a major shift in the last few years. I can't really ignore it. And I think it really started, let's say, back in COVID, right? Where I mentioned the rapid adoption of the cloud, but it wasn't just that. It was, the rapid digital acceleration. It was the rise of remote work. And, suddenly startups had a whole bunch of new problems that they could solve. And this created a huge opportunity for anyone to create a startup and really scale it rapidly. And you couple that with a bunch of new non-traditional investors that came into the picture who wanted to suddenly invest in venture capital, which was becoming a very, very attractive asset class. And this was given the highly active or the high rise in IPOs and liquidation. I think up till 2021, in that time period, we saw something like $900 billion in combined realized value just between the US and Israel. So in terms of like IPOs and M&As. And so ultimately what ended up happening is that the balance between the investor and the founder shifted, where all of a sudden, VCs were fighting over different deals, and therefore the deals were becoming overpriced, and there were very aggressive fundraising rounds happening. So if you look at that, and this is all 2020 and 2021, and the first half of 2022. And then if you look at the second half, we had tons of different geopolitical tensions, the war in Ukraine, the problems between the US and China. We had a rise in inflation. All of a sudden, the IPO market was shutting down. Public companies or companies that had went public were suffering. Startups were being closed. VCs that didn't have a clear strategy for how to support their CEOs during turbulence, they weren't going to succeed either. So you're talking about tons of non-traditional investors that I mentioned that all of a sudden didn't know what to do. So it was like a crisis, and companies had to really focus on, now, how do I make my business the most efficient that it can be? How am I going to survive this? How am I going to increase my runway and therefore, or like decrease my burn rate and therefore increase my runway? So that shifted the balance back to the investors, where we no longer had to make that fast 24-hour investment decision. We could take our time. And things the numbers, you can look, they returned to pre-COVID levels. And therefore, everyone was been in a panic mode. But I do think that, this year things are getting better. I think personally that hopefully in the next 6 months, the IPO market will open back up. And I think that because at least in the CSSP or the security space, you're not really seeing budgets decreasing. If anything, you're seeing the CISO budget increase. And that's because the threat landscape is increasing. So, with all this turbulence in the market, still the CISO has budget, and still the CISO needs to solve problems that are existing and ones that are arising with the growth of that threat landscape. I think we even did like a survey of our advisors, the CISOs from our advisory board, and majority of them actually saw their budgets increase. So, I personally think it's a great time to be a security investor, and that things will just hopefully look up from here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had a CFO on the podcast recently, and we was talking about the differences in terms of the investment landscape, and he was mentioning about not the venture capital firms, instead of spreading their bets across multiple different companies, they're putting everything, a lot of more cash into certain businesses. That's why you see 100 millions and whatever the investments are in some of these companies as well. So it's definitely interesting. I liked how you finished it on an optimistic and positive route, because I thought it was going downhill.
We all have to be optimistic, right? Otherwise, you can't really be an investor.
Definitely. Well, no, look, honestly, I appreciate you coming on, but just tell me where, or why should people reach out to NightDragon, and especially in the EMEA region? So tell me what's the real benefits for having you on board.
I think that it's very, very rare to get such an experienced operating executives in one place. and the connections, the people, the know-how, Dave's vision, it's unlike anything I've seen. And it's not just that, it's not just the vision and the talent, but it's also the dedication. So everything that NightDragon offers to its portfolio companies is also unlike anything I've seen. And I come from the value creation space, right? So, if you're looking to grow your company the right way with the right people in a good timeline that works for you, and partner with investors that really just want and have your best interest and your company's best interest in mind. So I would say that NightDragon is the best option.
Amazing stuff. No, definitely everybody should go check them out. They're amazing VC with amazing people as well. So I always like to finish on one question, Dorin. If you had to go back to the start of your career, obviously you've had an amazing career with being forward to 30 to 30 and everything along those lines, a crazy journey so far. But what would you tell yourself about the early days?
Wow, this is a good question. I actually really struggled at some points throughout the career. I mean, it looks great on the CV, right? But I think there's always downs, and you just kind of like need to be positive and need to stay a little bit delusional, honestly, and just keep going, because it'll be okay. I think I always looked back at what I studied, in college. Growing up in America, you're 18 years old and you have to decide what your career is going to be, right? You have to pick a major and say, this is the path I'm going. And you're 18 years old, you don't know what you want. You don't know what you're doing. And so I kind of was all over the place, right? I studied psych, business, and computer science in one degree. And I'm like, I always looked back on that and kind of said, I should have just studied computer science and I should have just been an engineer, or, that would have just made things so much easier. But I really don't have regrets about that. I for a while I did, and now I realize, it's all about just doing what you are interested in, doing what you're passionate about, and finding your thing or your place, and just needing to keep going. And I look at a lot of people who've had a really, really tough year this year because, all the layoffs and the turbulence. And I'm telling them, I've applied to so many companies in my day. I moved to Israel. I had no idea what I was doing. I just started talking to a million companies left and right because I'm not really someone that can sit still. Like I was home for about a month after I moved here. And I was like, I can't sit at home. Everyone was like, yeah, take the year off, take a few months off, go travel, go live your life. You're never going to have this opportunity again. And I was like, I can't do that because I need to know what I'm doing. I need to take action on my life. And really did go through a lot of tough times, but you just got to keep going and make sure that you're talking to the right people. If you're looking into a career in venture capital, for example, I didn't even know about venture capital or what it was till I was 23, 24 years old. And I learned about it in my MBA, where Dov Moran, who's the founder of Grove Ventures, he's also the inventor of the USB, super cool, super talented guy. He gave us a lecture and I was like, wow, that's what I need to do. That encompasses my 3 areas that I like. And so I just started having a bunch of different coffee meetings and cold reach outs to different VC partners, to different principals, to different, executives that do all these cool jobs. And I'm like, oh, that could be interesting, or this could be interesting. And I really asked them, what do you do every day? How does your day look? Is that something that I would want to do one day? And how did you get there? So just meeting the right people, keeping on going, staying a little delusional, and it'll be okay.
I like the staying and delusional thing. I think that's pretty cool. I think you need a bit of a delusion to get anywhere in life, don't you?
Oh yeah, especially during tough times.
You sure do. Well, Dorin, honestly, really appreciate you coming on the show. I've learned a lot as well today, so thank you for coming on. And looking forward to seeing where NightDragon and yourself goes in the future.
Thanks so much. It was great, Elliot. Thank you.